Spence. Roaming. What do you need?
I might need your help cleaning my computer a little bit.
Wait.
I downloaded software to try and clip the video, and it added a bunch of garbage to my laptop, and I'm not sure how to get rid of it. Oh, okay.
She's the reason that Boy Scouts are here.
Live stream.
There were two that came yesterday, and they said, yeah, we'll replace your car. But I don't remember anybody running it, and it was there. I didn't do a very good job.
Good morning, everybody. If we could have your attention, we'll go ahead and get started.
Turn that off.
Thanks for being here and being a great attentive audience today. It's an important day. Let me introduce myself. If you don't know me, I'm a substitute teacher here, Mr. Drive. I was a history teacher here with Mr. Hood for many years. I'm now volunteering at the Coos History Museum, and maybe recognize my voice when I say first down Bulldogs and basketball games. I want all the veterans to know, and I want you students to know, if you have parents that are interested in the military or are veterans themselves, the Coos History Museum has had veterans exhibits all year long, and right now there's a pretty cool one down there. It's called Vet Inc. 12 veterans from our community who have had tattoos associated with the military service have volunteered to have their photos taken and be interviewed about what it meant to serve and why they got the tattoos they did. It's a very unique exhibit, one you wouldn't normally see at a history museum, but it's free to veterans and their spouses, and it's on exhibit all the way until next spring. So if you want to see this interesting exhibit, come down to the museum. We're here today because 100 years ago this week, a pretty important event happened. A massive war ended. It was called the Great War. And it wasn't great because it was wonderful. It was great because it was huge and horrible. It was the most amazing and large and deadly war up to that time in world history. And it was a war where modern war machines were used really for the first time. This was the first war with tanks, machine guns, poison gas, aerial bombing. The airplane had been invented just 10 years earlier, and they were dropping bombs from the air. Over 40 million soldiers died on both sides of this war. 40 million. That'd be like a quarter of the United States population now if it was just that. This war was so horrible that some people that were bombed and killed could not be recognized. And one individual, an American whose remains were gathered, was in fact put in a cemetery at Arlington in Washington, D.C., and that's the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. I'm sure you've heard of that, and that comes out of this war, which we're talking about the 100-year anniversary this week. The war was fought between the Allied side and what's called the Central Powers. The Central Powers were the countries in the middle of Europe, Germany, Austria-Hungary. They were huge empires trying to expand. And the Allies, the French and the British at first, didn't want that to happen. America did join for several years, but when they did, we were in it up to our necks. The fighting ended on the 11th day of the 11th month at 11 o'clock. And people often ask, why 11:11? There's a Bible story, a parable, about a man who hired workers, and he paid the early workers a certain amount, and he paid different people he hired later in the day the same amount, and he hired some people at 11 o'clock when the work was almost done, and he paid them the same amount. And to this day, the term the 11th hour often means at the last minute where changes can't be made. So it was very symbolic when the Germans and the Austrians decided to surrender. They said to the Allies, you know, we'll sign the deal, and the Allies said, we'll do it at the 11th hour, because many people thought this war had been so horrible that if it had not ended on November 11th, 1918, it may have destroyed all the countries of Europe horribly. It would have been irreparably damaged. So it was like a last-minute deal. So 11/11 is a holiday we celebrate no matter what day of the week it falls on. If it fell on Wednesday this year, you would get school off on Wednesday. It's just like 4th of July and Christmas. We take it where it lands. It happens to be Sunday this year. That's why you're getting Monday off. The last soldier to die, here's how horrible the war was. The last soldier to die was an American who, even though he knew the war was ending at 11, and even though the Germans knew, he charged a German machine gun nest and was killed at 10:59. The Germans tried to stop him in their broken English, and yet he continued to charge. More people died the last day of the war than all those that died on D-Day in Normandy in World War II. That's a shocking thing. Why would people fight bitterly to the end? This war was so bitter. People wanted more land, last-second charges to get more land. Some people fired off ammunition just so they said they didn't have to carry it back when the peace came. Silly reasons. History teaches us about things like this, and I hope you think about the real ramifications of war. These, ladies and gentlemen, know about that, and I hope this is a teachable moment for you. Today, you did not say the Pledge of Allegiance at your normal time. The school is asking that when you go back to class at third period at 11 o'clock, you'll say the Pledge of Allegiance at 11 o'clock. And you'll do that in memory of 11/11/11. And I hope when you say the pledge today, would you please listen carefully and emphasize the last 5 words, liberty and justice for all. You guys agree that it's about time this country has liberty and justice for all? Yeah. All right. Let me tell you a little bit about North Bend High, because I wrote a book about it and I love North Bend High. In 1918, in World War I, there was 70 students at North Bend High. There were about 700 of you here. There were only 70. And when the war broke out, 18 young men left school and joined the war. That was 25% of the school population. Try to imagine right now, if war broke out next week, 180 of you in here left for the war. Think of what that would do to your community. Think what that would do to your school. Not only that, those 18 left, but a number of others left because Cruise and Bank Shipyards was building World War I vessels. And the lumber yards needed guys to work in the woods. So the school was decimated. That was the spring of 1917. In 1918, when the war was just finishing up, a plague called the Spanish flu hit the world and killed literally millions. And it came to Coos Bay and it killed people out where Miss Healy lives in Templeton. There was a young man that died of Spanish flu. And the flu was so contagious, they said people couldn't gather in groups. And in 1918, 100 years ago this fall, they closed the school at North Bend in October and didn't reopen until January. So on 11/11/1918, there was nobody here in the assembly to say, yay, the war is over, because school was closed until January, until the Spanish flu had abated. A year after the war ended, in 1919, on November 11th, Americans and most of the Allied countries, Britain, Australia, Canada, they celebrated the day, and they called it Armistice Day. So for all the English teachers out there, I'll throw this out. Armistice is a word that means truce, the giving up of military fighting. And Armistice Day was a big day in America for many, many years. In the 1950s, President Eisenhower changed it to Veterans Day, and that's what we celebrate today. And Veterans Day is not like Memorial Day, where we also put up a lot of flags and talk about our military. Memorial Day celebrates the sacrifices people made, and we honor the dead. Today is a day about honoring all veterans, living and dead. So that's a big difference. One more thing about Armistice Day related to North Bend High School. November 11th was always the biggest sporting event of the town. Armistice Day was the North Bend High School football played, Marshall High School football, from 1919 until about the 1950s, late 1950s. It was always the big game. The last World War I veteran died 7 years ago. He was 110 years old. So there are no living World War I veterans. But there are 21 million living veterans in the United States right now. 2 million of the 21 are women veterans. And some folks that you know on your staff are veterans. Did you know Gary Prince, your football coach, is an Army veteran? Let's have a round of applause for it. Did you know your new graduation specialist, Crystal Myers, was a Coast Guard woman? Nathan George, your resource officer, who I think is in the audience out there somewhere, there he is, he was in the Marines. You have a tech specialist, I'm not sure if he's here or not, Mike Perry, one of your tech specialists, was in the Army. And a lot of you had Mr. Conrad, the junior high, he was Navy. He's not here today, but let's hear it for John Conrad. There may be others too that I may have missed, but there are many among us that have served. I was in the Vietnam War era, and just at the tail end of it, North Bend High, when I graduated, I was drafted, but I wasn't sent because the war ended just as I was about to be in the military. I've regretted in some ways that I never served my country that way, and maybe that's why I have a passion for community service. So if you decide that military is not a way for life for you, serve your country in some other way. Serve it by voting, by serving on juries, and by supporting community service, okay? One last thing. The person that organized this today is not an American citizen. Chef Frank Murphy is Irish. He's not even a naturalized citizen. But he's traveled the world, like I have, and like many adults in this room. And those of us who travel have come to realize when you go out of North Bend, and especially out of the country, you come back and appreciate so much of what this country has. The freedom to speak, to go to the church of your choice, to read a newspaper of your choice, to get all kinds of freedoms. And we take those for granted sometimes. But I think Frank sees what America has been to him, how good it's been to him, and it's wonderful. And let's give a big round of applause for Chef Murphy. Today, he and the culinary arts people have prepared some pastries for these fine veterans we have here. and they'll be serving them lunch and taking meals even to homeless veterans this afternoon. So nice job, Culinary Arts. One last thing I'll say is that there's a phrase that I think is very appropriate for today. America is the land of the free because of the brave. And we have some wonderful veterans here that we now need to stand and applaud. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. And some North Bend graduates I see in uniform back there. Awesome to have you guys back too. Now you should be proud of the North Bend High School Band, which has won state 4 years. And they're going to play for you a tremendous patriotic song. We'll just sit and listen to America the Beautiful. Oakland High School Jazz Band. Matt Chrisman on saxophone. And now, students and faculty and guests, if we'd all stand, the local Coast Guard men and women would like to present the colors. Thank you, men and women of the Coast Guard. Please be seated. At this time, the students who have gathered flags that may have gotten a little dusty and worn over the years that we're going to replace, would you come and stand right here in front of the table? Come right around, go right around here. As most of you know, the administration had this idea that it's time to look at the flags. You guys should know there's a lot of etiquette about the flag. You never fly one at night without a light on it. You never let it touch the ground. And in this case, if you have a flag that you're retiring, you just don't throw it in the garbage. Scoot down a little bit more. Keep going to the left. We got a lot of flags here we're going to retire. We'll wind up giving these flags to veterans who knew how to properly and respectfully dispose of them. So as I understand it, at this time, you're going to roll up your flags. Is that correct? And you have a rubber band. These guys are going to help you, I think. You're going to roll them up, and we're going to band them. And then some of our young folks that are in the military right now are going to come out and help us gather the flags. And we'll take them to the folks that know best what to do at this point. There's a very special flag on the table in front with the red, white, and blue flowers that Mr. Murphy acquired. A cousin of his is fighting in Afghanistan. Is that right, Frank? And this flag came from a current military service person that was fighting in Afghanistan, and Frank's going to have that hanging in his room. If you're ever at a funeral of a veteran who's passed away, often there's a color guard and sometimes some folks that will give a military salute, firing some shots in the air, and they fold the flag in a very respectful way that drape a coffin of a military veteran. And most of you may not know this, but the nation's military cemetery, Arlington Cemetery in Washington, D.C., was once the home of a Confederate general, Robert E. Lee. And it was right outside the nation's capital. And during the war, the Union soldiers captured Arlington and decided to put Union dead soldiers into Robert E. Lee's land that once grew cotton and tobacco. That became our national cemetery. And now officers of a certain rank and civilians of a certain grade in the government, like presidents, are buried at Arlington. I visited there. That's where the statue with the Marines taking Iwo Jima is located. That's where the eternal flame that is on the grave of John F. Kennedy is located. I think President Taft is buried there, some other very recognizable names. That's one of the nation's highest honors to be buried at Arlington. If you're ever visiting Washington, D.C., and you can see all the sights in the nation's capital, make time to go across the river to visit Arlington. It's a moving experience. Now, at this time, I think I got this right. I'm learning on the fly here. You students are going to pick up a new flag. Is that correct? All right, once you guys go ahead and do that, you're going to pick up your new flags. You can help them do that. And any of the veterans that would like to, as we conclude the assembly today, if you'd like to go with one of these students to a room and have the flag placed, you can do that. You're also welcome to come back to the Hall of Champions at 11:45 for a lunch provided by our Culinary Arts Department. Thirteen stripes for the 13 colonies, right? Blue, a blue square with stars for each of the 50 states. E pluribus unum, our national motto in Latin, for many one, for many states, for many colonies, one flag. Let's thank all these folks who are helping us out, these students today. Let's dismiss the students first. So we're also taking Mr. Murphy's special flag and giving it to one of the students to take it to the classroom. And then we're going to release the students that are flag bearers right now, I think. Go ahead and head on out first and go to the classrooms. And if any one of you wants to follow, that's fine. If you don't, that's fine too. One more round of applause for our students and our veterans. Hey, you students were great today. I hope you think about your country in a different way. Thank you for honoring the adults in this community. You can do no wrong whenever you honor the elders of your community and special people that have died and sacrificed for your freedom. All right, head to third period and say the Pledge of Allegiance at 11 o'clock in a most respectful way.